Have you ever looked into the eyes of a creature so wild, so feared, only to realize it wasn't rage you saw, but a silent plea for mercy? The heat curled off the dry savanna like waves from an open flame. Dust clung to the air, clinging to clothes, to skin, to breath. Elias moved with practiced silence, every step calculated, his boots pressing down reeds that crackled beneath him. The sun, ruthless and unblinking, hung overhead like a judge, and the only shade was the shadow of a lone acacia tree stretching long and thin across the dirt. At 53, Elias looked every bit the hardened hunter people claimed he was. Leathered skin, a graying beard trimmed close, eyes like steel, flat, unwavering. He walked with a rifle slung over his shoulder, not because he expected to fire it today, but because out here, you never knew what expected you. Trailing a few paces behind was Kibbo, young and quick-footed, barely 20. Unlike Elias, Kibbo didn't walk like a predator. He moved more like the land belonged to him, like he was part of it. His dark eyes scanned the ground constantly, reading the earth as if it whispered secrets. "You hear that?" Kibbo asked, his voice barely above a breath. Elias stopped. He had the faintest rustle, like something dragging through the grass. Not hurried. Not hunting. Wounded. Elias raised a hand, signaling silence. Kibbo crouched instinctively, eyes scanning, fingers brushing the dry soil. For a moment, the world held its breath. No wind. No birdsong. Even the insects seemed to pause. Then came the sound again. It wasn't the skittering of a fleeing impala. It wasn't the frantic rustle of a warthog's dash. It was slower. Heavier. Intentional. And then they saw him. The lion stepped out from the thicket like a ghost summoned by heat and silence. He was huge, once majestic, now broken. His golden mane hung in clumps matted with dried blood and dirt. His right foreleg dragged uselessly behind him, the joint twisted, bones likely shattered. Gashes ran down his side, torn flesh puckered and raw. His breath came in ragged huffs, and his ribs strained beneath thinning skin. But what struck Elias more than the wounds, more than the sheer fact that this lion was walking openly into a clearing with two armed men, was the look in his eyes. Not defiance. Not threat. Pain. And something deeper. Recognition. Elias's hand drifted to the rifle instinctively, but he didn't raise it. "Is he, limping toward us?" Kibbo whispered, disbelief curdling his words. Elias said nothing. He stood there, motionless, staring at the lion who now stood less than 30 feet away. The animal didn't snarl. Didn't growl. He just stared back, head bowed slightly, not in submission, no. In exhaustion. His legs trembled. Blood dripped from a wound near his belly. Flies buzzed like shadows around his open sores. Elias tightened his grip on the rifle. "Do we shoot?" Kibbo asked, voice unsteady. The lion took one more step forward, then another. His paw left a dark print in the dirt, blood soaking the ground. His limbs quivered, and his breathing hitched. Still, he didn't stop. He was choosing to come closer. Elias had seen thousands of lions. He had hunted them, tracked them, even respected them in his own silent, detached way. But never in all his years had he seen one act like this. The lion took a final staggering step and collapsed onto the earth. The impact sent a small cloud of dust into the air. His massive body sprawled out, his flanks heaving. His eyes, still locked on Elias, did not close. Then, the lion did something impossible. He lifted his paw slowly, agonizingly, and stretched it forward across the earth. Not in aggression. Not in desperation. But in something almost human. A request. A plea. Elias blinked. For a moment, the rifle in his hands felt like a relic from another life. Something crude. Obsolete. "He's not attacking," Kibbo said, barely audible. "He's asking?" Elias stepped forward, slowly. Cautiously. His every instinct screamed against it, but he moved anyway. The lion didn't flinch. Didn't so much as twitch. The space between them was thick with heat and something else, something heavier. He crouched down 5 feet away, close enough now to see the full extent of the lion's injuries. A metal snare still bit into his hind leg, the wire cutting deep into muscle. The wound had festered, rotting the flesh around it. There were claw marks, other animals, perhaps, taking advantage of the lion's weakness. And a deep slash across his flank looked fresh. Poachers, Elias muttered. He escaped. Kibbo stood frozen, disbelief stamped across his face. Why would he come to us? We're humans. He should have run. Elias didn't answer. He didn't know. He only knew that he couldn't leave him. The lion let his paw fall at last, eyes fluttering, but not closing. He wasn't unconscious. He was watching. Waiting. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at Elias's shirt. Flies buzzed past his ears, drawn to the lion's wounds. He reached slowly into his bag, pulling out a half-empty canteen of water. He didn't dare get closer, not yet. So he poured a thin stream of water onto the ground and pushed it slowly forward with his boot until it formed a shallow puddle near the lion's snout. The lion sniffed, then dragged his tongue across the dirt, lapping what little he could. He trusts you, Kibbo said, amazed. No, Elias replied. He has no choice. They stayed like that for minutes that stretched long and quiet. The lion drank a little more, then rested his head down. He didn't sleep, but his body relaxed, like the act of reaching out had exhausted what little strength remained. As Elias studied the beast, memories began to return, uninvited, but unrelenting. Nathan. His boy. He had been about Kibbo's age when he first came out to the savannah. Bright-eyed. Full of questions. Full of wonder. He'd wanted to be a vet. Wanted to save animals, not hunt them. Elias had taken him along one season, told himself it was to show the boy reality. They were tracking rhinos when it happened. Poachers. Traps. Chaos. Nathan didn't survive. And Elias had never forgiven the land. Or the animals. Or himself. But now, this lion. This impossible moment. It cracked something open inside him that had been buried under layers of guilt and silence. He rose to his feet. We're staying here tonight, he said. Kibbo's eyes widened. Here? With him? Elias nodded. He's dying. If we leave him now, he'll be gone by morning. Isn't that nature? Kibbo asked. Elias didn't reply. Instead, he walked back toward the supplies they'd left beneath the tree. He'd brought some basic medical gear. Not much. Enough for a person. Maybe, barely, enough for a lion. As the sun dipped toward the horizon and the sky turned orange gold, Elias returned to the lion's side with bandages, water, a small knife, and antiseptic. And for the first time since Nathan died, he began to try and save something. He didn't know why. He didn't know if the lion would let him. But he had to try. The night deepened. Stars spilled across the sky. Crickets hummed in the distance. And Elias knelt beside the king of the savannah, broken, bleeding, but still noble, and whispered, I'm going to help you, if you let me. The lion didn't move. But he didn't resist either. As Elias leaned in to inspect the snare, a low, guttural sound rose from the lion's throat. Not a growl. Something softer. Mournful. Like grief. And just as Elias placed his hand gently near the wound, he heard it, a faint rustle behind him. He turned. His eyes widened. Emerging from the tall grass, small and trembling, was a lion cub. Eyes wide, ribs showing, no more than a few weeks old. It stepped forward, past Elias, and nestled beside the injured lion's chest. Elias's heart stopped. He wasn't asking for himself, he whispered, stunned. He was asking for her. What would you do if the fiercest creature in the wild trusted you not with his life, but with his child? The cub's fur shimmered faintly in the moonlight, soft and golden, a pale echo of the broken lion it curled against. Elias couldn't move, not at first. The savannah, which just seconds ago had hummed with the weight of decision, now held its breath in awe. He had come here expecting nothing more than silence and stillness. A quiet hunt. A long walk through familiar dust. But this? This was something else entirely. Kibbo knelt beside him now, his breath hitching in his throat. She followed him, he whispered. No, Elias replied slowly, eyes fixed on the fragile bundle of life curled into the lion's warmth. He led her. The lion, though barely conscious, shifted slightly as the cub nestled closer. His body, wrecked and shaking, still tried to shelter her with what remained of his strength. A soft huff left his nostrils, a sound more fatherly than fierce. Elias had seen lions defend cubs before, but only from a distance. Nature documentaries. Rare moments captured through binoculars. But this was something far more intimate. It wasn't a show of dominance or protection for pride's sake. It was a dying father's final act of love. Kibbo stared, eyes wide and glistening. She's so small, he said. If he dies, she won't last the night, Elias finished for him. The cub opened her eyes, blinking slowly. They were impossibly wide, full of curiosity and confusion. She didn't seem afraid of the humans nearby. If anything, she regarded Elias as just another strange shape in this unfamiliar, moonlit world. And the lion still hadn't moved. His breathing was shallower now. Elias could see the pain flickering through his heavy eyes, like a candle fighting against wind. Elias turned back to his pack and grabbed the remaining gauze, antiseptic, and the pair of wire cutters he'd almost left behind. He didn't speak. Words had become too heavy to waste. The snare around the lion's hind leg was cruel, digging deep into the flesh, hidden beneath blood and clotted fur. Elias had seen these snares before, left by poachers who didn't care what they caught. Traps that didn't kill cleanly. They just waited. Until the animal either chewed its own leg off or bled out. But this lion hadn't done either. He'd run. Survived. Protected. And now he lay here, between life and death. Elias moved slowly, every motion deliberate. He reached toward the snare, letting his hand hover just beside the lion's leg. No response. He looked at the lion's face. Still watching. Still trusting. Elias took a breath. I'm going to cut it off, he said softly, more for himself than the lion. Hold still. He placed the cutters around the metal wire, steadying his grip. The resistance was intense, the wire bit back, but with a final squeeze, there was a harsh metallic snap. The lion didn't roar. He didn't flinch. He only let out a long, trembling exhale. A sound that could have been relief. Elias quickly cleaned the wound, pouring antiseptic over it, pressing gauze into the gash. The lion's body twitched from the sting, but he didn't lash out. His eyes remained locked on Elias's. When the dressing was done, Elias stepped back. He couldn't do more here. Not without real equipment. Not without help. But the bleeding had slowed. And the snare was gone. The cub mewed softly, a high-pitched sound that tugged something deep in Elias's chest. She nuzzled into her father's mane, pawing at his massive face. Elias turned to Kibbo. We need to find shelter. If we leave them exposed out here, they won't last the night. Kibbo hesitated. You want to move a full-grown lion? Elias looked back at the pair. We don't have a choice. Together, they gathered blankets from the supply kit, fashioned a crude stretcher, and after what felt like hours of careful, exhausting work, they managed to roll the lion gently onto it. The cub followed, never straying more than a few inches from her father. Step by step, foot by foot, they dragged the stretcher toward a small rocky alcove Elias remembered from years ago, an old shelter used by herders to hide from the rain. It was narrow, hidden beneath a ridge, and shaded even under the moon. By the time they reached it, the lion was half conscious, groaning softly. His breathing had grown erratic. But when the cub clambered up beside him and curled once more into his side, his eyes opened briefly. Just long enough to see her. Just long enough to know. Elias collapsed beside the ridge wall, heart pounding. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. His hands trembled, not from fear, but something deeper. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Grief. Hope. Both. Kibbo handed him a flask of water. "We can't just leave them in the morning," the boy said. "We have to do more." Elias nodded, silent. There were still questions gnawing at the edge of his mind. Why had the lion come to them? Why hadn't he gone off to die in silence, like most predators did? What had driven him to crawl, bleeding and broken, toward human scent? It wasn't just survival. It was something else. Kibbo lay back against the stones. "I've never seen anything like this." "Neither have I," Elias admitted. The night wore on. Crickets chirped. An owl called once, then again. The cub slept pressed against her father's chest, rising and falling with his uneven breaths. Elias didn't sleep. He just sat, staring at the lion, wondering what he was supposed to do now. He thought of Nathan again. The way his son used to watch the sunrise with wonder. How he'd crouch down beside even the smallest injured animal and whisper, "Don't be scared. I'm here now." Elias had told himself for years that the wild was no place for sentiment. That death was just a fact of nature. But watching this broken lion cradle his cub in the quiet dark, Elias realized something with bone-deep clarity: love existed here, too. At dawn, the light bled slowly across the horizon. Orange. Gold. The first heat of morning began to rise from the soil. The lion stirred. He groaned, shifting slightly. His massive head rose a few inches off the ground. He looked at Elias, not as predator to prey, but as one father to another. There was something almost grateful in that look. Then he turned to his cub and licked the top of her head gently. Elias stood, knees popping. He walked toward the mouth of the ridge and scanned the distant horizon. A faint dust trail curled in the distance. "Vehicle," he said. "Too early for tourists." "Locals?" Kibbo climbed up beside him. "You think it's?" Elias narrowed his eyes. The dust was moving too fast. "Poachers," he said grimly. "Coming back for what got away." Panic clenched his gut. If they found the lion now, wounded, vulnerable, they'd finish the job. Take his pelt. Maybe worse. And the cub? Elias turned quickly. "Get the radio. Now. We need backup. Wildlife rescue, anti-poaching patrols, anyone." Kibbo rushed to the gear bag, fumbling with the old radio, adjusting frequencies. Static crackled. Elias grabbed his rifle, heart pounding. The last time he'd faced poachers, he'd lost his son. He wasn't going to lose anyone else today. But as he turned back to the lion, he realized something. The spot where the lion had lain was now empty. The cub remained. But the father was gone. Elias's eyes darted. No blood trail. No sign of panic. Just absence. He rushed toward the edge of the rocks, scanning every bush, every shadow. Nothing. The lion had vanished. Without a sound. Without a goodbye. Elias stood frozen, unsure whether to feel awe or dread. How could something that broken just disappear? Behind him, the cub let out a soft cry. Kibbo shouted, "Radio's working. I've got someone on the line, hello?" "Yes, this is Kibbo Moshimba, we've got an injured lion cub." Repeat, a cub. Elias turned back to the little one. Alone now. Shivering. Waiting. And he realized with a sudden, breathless certainty, the lion had not come for help. He had come to pass her on. How far would you go to protect a creature that doesn't speak your language, but trusts you more than its own kind? The cub wouldn't stop crying. Not loudly, not the kind of wailing that pierced the air, just small, broken whimpers that barely escaped her tiny mouth. Each soft sound pulled something deeper from Elias than he ever expected. Not guilt. Not sadness. Something ancient. A sense of duty that clawed at his chest like an invisible force. He knelt beside her again. She was still in the shelter, her body curled where her father had left her. But her eyes kept darting toward the rocks, toward the ridge where he'd disappeared. She didn't understand. How could she? He had been everything, her protector, her world, and in the blink of an eye, he was gone. She hadn't even seen him vanish. One moment, she was asleep beneath his massive paw. The next, the warmth was gone, and the silence came rushing in. Elias gently extended a hand. He didn't leave you, he murmured. He just gave you to us. The cub blinked at him. Her eyes were wide, frightened, but not hostile. She made no move to run, though her small body trembled as the wind swept through the rocks. Kibbo appeared at the edge of the ridge, breathless. "Rescue's coming," he said. "They're an hour out. Maybe less. I told them it was urgent." Elias didn't move his hand. "Good. But we may not have an hour." "What do you mean?" Elias nodded toward the horizon. "That dust trail hasn't stopped moving. And it's coming closer." Kibbo's face fell. "You think they saw us?" "I think they saw him." He didn't need to say who. The poachers would have noticed the trail, the blood, the disturbance in the ground. And if they were professionals, which Elias knew most of them were, they'd follow it until they found what they were looking for. The lion's pelt was valuable. But a cub? A cub was rare. Exotic. A prize. Elias stood slowly, his back stiff from sleeping on stone. "We're not waiting here," he said. "We're moving her. Now." Kibbo blinked. "Move her where?" "There's a canyon east of here. Tight passage, hard to follow without knowing the path. I can get us there in 20 minutes if we move fast." "What about the father?" Elias paused. A shadow crossed his face. "If he's still alive, he'll find us." He wasn't sure if he believed that, but he had no time for doubts. Kibbo didn't argue. He pulled out the supply sling from their pack and started adjusting the straps to cradle the cub safely. It wasn't made for lions, but it would do. With gentle hands, Elias wrapped a blanket around her tiny body, then lifted her slowly, cradling her against his chest. Her muscles tensed. But she didn't fight. Instead, she pressed her face into his shirt and whimpered once, then went quiet. Elias swallowed hard. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a promise. They left the shelter behind in silence. The sky above was painted with hues of dawn, peach and lavender clouds stretching across a yawning blue. The wind smelled of dust and heat. In the distance, vultures circled. Kibbo kept glancing behind them. The dust trail had vanished, for now. But Elias knew better than to trust that. Poachers didn't advertise their approach. They slipped through brush like ghosts, crouching in silence, rifles slung across their backs, eyes cold. They moved quickly through the low grass, over shallow creeks and thorny underbrush. The cub barely stirred. Elias felt the rise and fall of her breath against his chest, a steady rhythm that grounded him. It was strange, this bond. She wasn't his. And yet she was. He didn't know when the line had blurred. The entrance to the canyon came into view, two tall walls of stone rising from the earth, narrowing into a thin, jagged path barely wide enough for one person. It had once been a riverbed, Elias remembered. Bone dry now. The perfect place to disappear. "Go," he whispered to Kibbo. The boy nodded and slid inside first, checking the path, ears tuned to every sound. Elias followed, holding the cub close. The stone walls echoed every step. Even the breeze sounded like a whisper from ancient voices. The deeper they went, the cooler the air became. The sun vanished above them. Shadows hugged the canyon walls. They found a hollow halfway through, an overhang large enough to duck beneath. A small pool of water still clung to a stone depression, left behind by the last rainy season. Elias laid the cub down gently on a spread jacket. She sniffed the new place but didn't cry. Maybe she sensed they were safe, for now. Kibbo dropped beside Elias, panting. What if they find the entrance? They won't risk it. Canyon's too narrow. Too easy to get ambushed. Still, what if? Elias pulled his rifle close. Then they meet me first. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't hollow. It felt watchful. Elias didn't rest. His eyes scanned every ledge, every ridge of rock. His body remained tense. He didn't trust the quiet. Nature was never truly still, unless something unnatural had entered its space. The cub stirred slightly and let out a soft sound. Elias leaned closer. She was dreaming. He could see the twitch of her paws, the flicker of her ears. Maybe in her mind, she was chasing butterflies. Or running beside her father. Free. Safe. He hoped it was that. He hoped she never remembered the pain. Kibbo looked over. What do we do with her when rescue arrives? Elias didn't answer right away. It was the question he'd been avoiding. She won't survive in the wild alone, he said finally. Too young. She needs milk. Care. Constant protection. So, captivity? Elias flinched at the word. A sanctuary. Somewhere she's safe. Somewhere she can be watched. Raised. Kibbo hesitated. That's not what her father wanted. Elias's jaw tightened. He wanted her to live. The air thickened between them. Kibbo didn't push further. A sharp crack echoed from above. Both men froze. Elias snapped his head toward the canyon's edge. Another crack. Footsteps. Someone was above them, moving across the upper ridge. Slow. Searching. Kibbo reached for the rifle. No, Elias whispered. Let them pass. The cub stirred again. A soft, scared cry escaped her throat. Elias gently touched her side. Another shadow crossed above, brief but clear. They were close. Too close. Then, silence. No more cracks. No more footfalls. Just the wind again. After a few minutes, Elias let out a slow breath. They're not climbing down, he murmured. Too risky. They'll circle back. Wait. Kibbo looked at the cub. How long do we stay? Elias opened his mouth to answer, then froze. The cub was standing. Wobbling slightly, but standing. Her ears perked toward the canyon mouth. Her nose lifted. And then, she let out a cry, a loud, high-pitched sound that echoed off the rocks. Not scared. Calling. Kibbo rose instantly. What is it? Elias didn't speak. He rose too. His eyes locked onto the canyon entrance. A sound reached him. Barely there. A low rumble. A growl. But not of warning. It was deep. Familiar. A voice. And then he saw it. The outline of a lion. Massive. Wounded. But walking. Step after step, his head held high, his eyes blazing with recognition. The cub squealed and bolted forward, stumbling but determined. Kibbo gasped. It's him. Elias stood frozen. The lion, had come back. Blood matted one leg. His mane was torn in places. He moved like stone come to life, each movement deliberate, every breath a battle. But he had come back. He lowered his head to the cub as she rubbed against him, licking her once, then turning his gaze to Elias. They stared at each other. Man. Beast. No barriers. Elias stepped forward, eyes wet. You knew where we were. The lion didn't move. Didn't growl. Just watched. And then, slowly, he turned toward the canyon's far end, and began to walk. The cub looked back once at Elias, and followed. Elias didn't stop them. Didn't call. Didn't dare. He knew what this was. The lion hadn't come for help. He had come to say goodbye. Have you ever witnessed a goodbye so powerful it leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about wild instincts and human connection? The silence left behind in that canyon was deafening. Elias stood rooted to the ground long after the lion and his cub disappeared into the shadows. Dust still clung to the air where their forms had vanished, like the memory itself refused to settle. Kibbo remained beside him, eyes fixed on the space where father and daughter had last stood. It should have been a relief, should have filled him with triumph to see the lion survive, to see the cub reunited with the one creature who could protect her the way only her kind could. But all Elias felt was a deep, aching stillness in his chest. He didn't understand it at first. Why it felt like loss instead of victory. They'll be okay, Kibbo said, softly. Elias nodded. It was all he could do. But the thought lingered, heavy as stone, for how long? The lion was hurt. Badly. Even from a distance, Elias had seen the stiffness in his steps, the blood still fresh on his flank, the exhaustion in every motion. Wounds like that didn't heal easily, not in the wild. And now he carried more than just himself. He carried the weight of fatherhood. Alone. The radio crackled to life on Kibbo's hip. He fumbled for it, answering. Elias didn't listen to the words. Only caught fragments, coordinates, arrival time, questions. He tuned it all out. His eyes were still on the place where the lion had walked away. When Kibbo ended the call, he looked up. The rescue chopper is 20 minutes out. They want us to meet them at the southern ridge. Elias nodded again, this time more mechanically. Let's go. But as they began the climb back up the canyon path, something within him itched. A gnawing feeling he couldn't place. He paused once to look back. The canyon was empty now. Quiet. He turned away. But the silence followed him. By the time the helicopter's shadow swept across the grass, the sun was a full blaze in the sky. Heat shimmered off the rocks, and the scent of fuel and machine oil filled the air as the craft descended. The blades kicked up dust and dry leaves, swirling them in a miniature storm. The team disembarked, 3 conservation officers, a medic, and the pilot. They rushed toward Elias and Kibbo, peppering them with questions. Where's the animal? Where's the cub? Is it injured? Did the poachers make contact? Elias held up a hand. They're gone, he said. The father returned. Took her. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the lead officer, a man named Jansen, stepped forward. You're telling me the wounded adult male returned and walked off with the cub? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Jansen scratched his beard. That's unprecedented. I mean, we know lions are intelligent, but to track your location, avoid the poachers, and navigate back while injured, he didn't just track us, Elias said. He knew where we were, who we were. He didn't come blindly. He came for her. And once he got her, he left. Jansen exhaled slowly. We need to follow them. Tag them, at least. No, Elias's voice was sharp. It caught even Kibbo off guard. Jansen raised a brow. Excuse me? They don't need us following them. Not now. Not like this. We have a responsibility, we had a responsibility, Elias snapped. And we fulfilled it. We kept her alive. We gave him the chance to come back. Now we let him do the rest. Jansen's lips tightened. You're letting your emotions interfere with protocol. Maybe. But if that lion made it through everything, wounds, terrain, danger, just to get back to her, then we owe him one thing. Respect. Not surveillance. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Jansen sighed. Fine. But we'll stay in the area. For a while. Just in case. They set up a temporary camp near the ridge. As the sun dipped low again, casting long orange shadows across the savanna, Elias sat on a crate near the fire, staring into the flames. The chatter of the team faded behind him. He was lost in thoughts he couldn't put into words. Kibbo joined him quietly. You saw his eyes, the boy said. Elias nodded. There was something human in them. Elias chuckled once, humorless. No. Something more. They sat in silence after that. When the morning came, the real search began, not for the lion, but for signs of the poachers. The trail from the earlier day had all but vanished in the night wind, but Elias knew they were still out there. Poachers didn't just give up. And if they figured out the cub was still with her father, they'd try again. So Elias stayed. He and Kibbo remained in the region with the rescue team, scouring the area during the day, monitoring for radio signals, listening for gunshots or shouts or the low thrum of illegal vehicles. Nights were harder, filled with distant howls, shifting shadows, and the unrelenting ache of helplessness. They found no tracks. No blood. No remains. But no lions either. Until the fourth day. Kibbo was the first to hear it, just after dawn. A low, deep roar, carried faintly on the wind. Not a challenge. Not a call for dominance. It was a warning. They followed it, slowly, over dry hills and around stone ridges. Every footstep was cautious. The air grew thick with the scent of musk and earth. And then, just beyond the edge of a shallow ravine, they saw them. The lion stood tall atop a small hill, his mane stirring in the morning breeze. The cub sat beside him, smaller than ever, but her eyes clear, alert. Watching. He saw them. Elias, standing still in the open. The lion didn't move. Didn't flee. Didn't roar again. Just looked. A long, heavy stare that passed between them like a bridge across species, across stories, across everything. Elias felt something then. A pulse. A moment of understanding. Thank you. And then the lion turned, nudged his daughter forward, and disappeared once more into the wild. This time, Elias didn't follow. But he knew, deep down, that the story wasn't over. Something told him they'd meet again. Somewhere, somehow. Because when fate brings together man and beast through pain and courage and sacrifice, those threads don't just snap and vanish. They weave something permanent. Unseen. But unbreakable. What would you do if the wild itself remembered you, if a beast you once saved came back not to survive, but to protect you in return? The day had begun like any other, sunlight cutting clean through the horizon, the sky smeared in streaks of gold and crimson. Birds darted over the savanna, and the air was still enough to hear the whisper of wind through the grass. Elias was packing up. 2 weeks had passed since he last saw the lion and his cub. And though every fiber of his being wanted to stay, to ensure their safety beyond any shadow of a doubt, he knew it was time. Kibbo stood beside the old Land Rover, helping him load the last supply crate into the back. The boy hadn't said much that morning. He didn't need to. The weight in the air between them said enough. They had witnessed something few others had, a story born in blood and trust, written not in words but in action. And now, the curtain was closing. Any regrets? Kibbo asked, finally breaking the silence. Elias looked across the dry hills one last time. No. Just questions. Kibbo smirked faintly. Like if we'll ever see them again? Elias didn't answer. He climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine coughed to life. They started down the path away from camp, toward the ridge where the main road waited beyond. 10 minutes into the drive, Kibbo leaned forward. "You hear that?" Elias slowed the vehicle. Yes. It was faint, but it was there. A sound no one forgets once they've heard it. Gunshots. Distant. Echoing across the hills. 3 cracks. Then silence. Elias's hands tightened around the steering wheel. His jaw clenched. He turned the wheel sharply, off the road and back toward the open terrain. "We're not leaving," he said. Kibbo grabbed his binoculars. "North Ridge. That's where it came from." The vehicle bounced hard across the uneven ground. Dust exploded beneath the tires, the suspension groaning with every jolt. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Something had changed. Something was wrong. And Elias knew, deep in his gut, that the lion was in danger. They reached the ridge within minutes. Parked behind a thicket of acacias, they moved on foot. Each step was deliberate. Quiet. They stayed low, hearts pounding, adrenaline hot in their blood. Then they saw the smoke. And beyond it, figures. Poachers. 3 of them, armed. One stood over something on the ground. A lion. But it wasn't the father. It was the cub. She was limp. Motionless. Elias's breath caught in his chest. The world tilted. "No," he whispered. But before he could move, before his body could obey the scream building inside him, a roar shattered the sky. It was the kind of sound that split the air in two. The lion. He came like thunder, mane wild, eyes burning, a force of fury and desperation all in one. He slammed into the nearest poacher, sending him flying into the dust. The second man turned to shoot, but the lion swerved with unnatural speed, clawing him down in a single, devastating strike. The third poacher fled. Sprinting toward the brush, he didn't even look back. Elias ran. So did Kibbo. They reached the clearing just as the lion limped to the cub's side, nudging her softly with his nose. She didn't move. The lion let out a low, guttural cry. Not a roar. A sound of mourning. Of loss. Elias approached, slow. Hands up. Voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," but then, she twitched. A paw. A faint groan. The cub was alive. The bullet had grazed her, barely missing her shoulder. Blood stained her fur, but her eyes fluttered open. The lion stepped back, chest heaving, as Elias knelt beside her. Kibbo dug into the medkit, already pulling out antiseptic and gauze. "She's lucky," Kibbo whispered. "Really lucky." They worked quickly. The lion watched in silence, his body trembling not from fear, but from restraint. Every muscle in him screamed to protect, to lash out. And yet, he waited. He trusted. Elias wrapped the wound with gentle hands. "You're gonna be okay," he said, not sure if he was speaking to her, or to himself. When they were done, the cub tried to stand. Her legs wobbled, but she pressed against her father's side. He steadied her with his body, allowing her to lean into his strength. The 3 of them stood there, man, beast, and child of both worlds. Then Elias saw it. Behind the lion's front leg, another wound. Fresh. A bullet embedded near the ribcage. The father had been shot again. But he hadn't stopped. He had come anyway. Fought anyway. Saved her anyway. Kibbo looked at Elias. "We have to treat that. He won't last." Elias nodded. He stepped forward. The lion didn't move. Didn't growl. Didn't bare his teeth. He simply lowered himself to the ground, exposing the wound. Inviting help. Elias's hands shook as he worked. Blood soaked his fingers. The bullet was deep, but not fatal, if treated. With Kibbo's help, they cleaned the area, stopped the bleeding, applied antibiotics. The lion winced once, but never flinched away. When it was over, Elias leaned back, exhausted. The lion rose, slow and heavy, then turned to face him. There, for a long moment, their eyes locked. And in that silence, Elias understood. He had saved the cub. The lion had saved them. And now, they were even. No words. No gestures. Just the wind, and the savannah, and something ancient passing between them. The lion let out a soft rumble, almost a purr. Then he turned, nudged his daughter, and together, they walked into the tall grass. The sun caught their silhouettes, father and child, casting long shadows that stretched across the land like echoes of a legend. Elias didn't follow. He didn't need to. Because something told him their story was far from forgotten. Later that night, back at camp, Kibbo sat by the fire, staring into the flames. "You think they'll be all right?" he asked. Elias smiled. "They already are." And as the stars shimmered above them, wild and infinite, Elias realized something he hadn't before. Sometimes, the most powerful stories aren't the ones where humans tame the wild, but the ones where the wild chooses to trust a human. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something deep and unforgettable, please subscribe to the channel and leave your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Elias's place? Do you believe lions can remember? Trust? Let's keep this conversation alive. Your voice matters more than you know.